Welcome back to Stories Under the Stairs, where we share our stories from the closet under my stairs. This is my first official episode where I will be reading to you stories that were sent in to me by other people about their traumatic upbringings or just hardships in general. So let's jump right into it with our first story. This story is titled, What If? I was born to an addict mother and had drugs in my system at birth. I almost didn't even make it. Sometimes I wish I didn't. I was taken from my mother's care immediately, where I was placed into the foster care system and was legally adopted by a woman, let's call her Carol, before I even turned one. Carol dealt with mental illness so bad that I often wonder if growing up with an addict's mother would have been any worse than what I had to deal with. I'm not exactly sure what Carol's diagnosis was, but I assume it was some sort of personality disorder along with schizophrenia. We could be having a great time, and out of nowhere, she would switch into a completely different person. It got worse as I got older. When I was in fourth grade, she started accusing me of being sent by the government to spy on her and would tell me all the time how she regretted adopting me. That was actually how I found out I was adopted. Sometimes when she had these episodes, she would make me spend all day on the back patio and even made me sleep out there. She didn't care what the weather was as long as I couldn't spy on her. She would physically abuse me and even starve me, which, if I'm being honest, is a wild thing to do by someone who thinks they're being watched by the government. I wish someone was watching so they could have saved me sooner. I remember eating as much as I could at school so I wouldn't be as hungry at home. But summertime was rough. There were times where I remember making salad out of grass and dirt when I was left in the backyard. That's how bad it was. I don't know how this went on for so long before someone realized I wasn't okay. One day in fifth grade, I kept falling asleep in class. My teacher questioned why I was so tired. I told her I couldn't sleep because it was raining and I had to stay on the patio that night. That's the day my life changed forever. That same day, I was brought to my very first residential placement, which only brought on new forms of trauma and abuse. But I guess that's a story for another day. When I turned 22, I found out that my adopted mother passed away from. If I'm being honest, I have a lot of hate and anger towards Carol still to this day. I know I shouldn't because it's clear she was fighting demons of her own, but for some reason I can't let it go. I know this is going to sound even worse, but I hate Carol more than I hate my own birth mother. I often wonder how different my life would be if I wasn't taken from my mother. I can't help but think that maybe having a child would have changed her for the better. Maybe she would have loved me better than Carol was capable of. I know the odds of that are low, but I've lived my entire life thinking, what if? That is so scary for a kid to deal with. Like, could you imagine finding out that you were adopted because your adopted mother thinks that you're a government spy? Like, that is crazy. And making you sleep. Oh my God. I can understand the hatred for Carol. I really can. And I also completely understand the questions of what if, because I mean, that's your birth mother. Why wouldn't you want to know what things could have been like if she was there, if you were with her instead? Especially because the outcome that you did have was just so traumatic and scary. And I am so sorry you had to deal with that. That is a lot. And despite the anger that you're holding on to, I really hope that you're doing better today as an adult. But okay, let's get into our next story. Okay, this one they titled Dad Jokes. But warning, it's not funny at all. You know the joke about the dad that leaves to go get milk and doesn't come back? Well, here's a new one for you. When I was 12 years old, my father told me we were going to the mall and instead pulled up to the social service office where he told them that he couldn't take care of me anymore. Backstory: my mom left my dad when I was only a couple months old and he raised me on his own. Me and him had a pretty good relationship, so I was completely blindsided by his decision to give me up. I only remember good things about him. He was overall a good dad up until that point. I guess I did get lucky because I ended up with a foster family that really did care for me. But I was still angry growing up and I couldn't understand how or why my dad could treat me like I was a lost dog being dropped off at the pound. That's so sad. Later in life, I found out that he was dealing with a lot of mental illness, a lot of mental health issues, and just felt like someone else could take better care of me. I spoke with him a couple times in my adult years, and he's definitely not right in his mind. I feel bad to say it, but I did find some sort of healing in that. I went all my life thinking something was wrong with me. I just wish I knew his reasons sooner because maybe it would have saved me some heartache. But then again, maybe not. Could you imagine the type of abandonment issues that would cause? The type of trust issues that would cause? Like, that is so scary. Like, you're to think you're going to the mall with your dad and he takes you to a place and just drops you off, never to get you again. That is awful, and I'm so sorry. That That is horrible. Y'all, I am only two stories into the series, and I did not know that it would be this heavy. I did not know that these stories would make me feel the way they got me feeling. Um, you just never know what a person has been through. You just never know what a person has been through. It's crazy. Let's get into the last story. Okay, this email was titled Guinea Pig. Hi, Becca. This is a little different from just a personal story, more like an awareness. I rarely hear people talk about how bad children are drugged in the system. Literal test subjects to whatever pills are on the market. I lived in a placement for 6 years where I myself, along with so many other kids, were diagnosed with mental disorders that they probably didn't even have. I was a kid who was lost and confused because my life abruptly changed and I was removed from everything I ever knew and placed into a setting with a bunch of other kids going through the same thing. Sometimes I reacted with anger, sometimes I was sad. But now that I'm older, I know that those were normal feelings for what I was going through. And I was never bipolar. I was never dealing with personality disorders or even defiance disorders like they claimed. But guess what? I was on so many different medications that my little body didn't even need for so many different diagnoses that I didn't even have. I think about this a lot and I wonder how many other kids this actually happened to and if any of them were affected long term by the medications. Okay, this is actually a topic that I'm very experienced in, unfortunately. I lived in a placement where we had an on site psychiatrist that we would go and talk to, and there was an ongoing joke. And that joke was that every time he diagnosed a kid and put them on medication, he got a bonus on his check. That's how often he put kids on medication. Is that there? I don't even know if it was a joke. Okay, the staff started this joke. It could have been a rumor, it could have been complete facts. But every time they would say that every time he gave a kid a medication, he got a bonus on his check. And I believe it. I have been to the psychiatrist as an adult, and the stuff that they told me that I was diagnosed with as a kid in these placements, the psychiatrists are like, no, the hell you don't. You don't have that. And I know that I am not the only person that that has happened to. Like they were just giving out diagnose the way Oprah was giving out cars, they were giving out diagnosis and pills. There was another place that I lived where they were legally allowed to give us medication to calm us down. And I remember this one time I had got into an argument with a girl. It wasn't even that deep. It wasn't even that serious. But we got into an argument and they ended up restraining us both, like putting us, strapping us to beds and injecting us with medication. And it was something crazy like Thorazine, Seroquel, and Benadryl. Like I want to say those were the three things that they put in it. I was asleep for 3 days. I missed my 15th birthday because I was asleep. Asleep. Like sometimes I can't help but think that I was like in a medically induced coma or something. Because what that, like, there's just no way you can sleep for 3 days without getting up to use the bathroom, without getting, like, when I think back to that, I think that I am so lucky to be alive because it just, as an adult, it does not make sense to me. And the fact that after I was asleep for so many hours, they didn't get medical attention for me or anything, like I am just so lucky that I even woke up from that. But okay, that is about all the time that we have here for my first episode of Stories Under the Stairs. A huge thank you to everyone that shared their stories with me and allowed me to share their stories for them. And yeah, my goal with this channel again is just to create a safe space where we all are comfortable enough to share our stories with each other and create a community where we feel a little less alone. Um, with that being said, if you have a story that you want to share, my email's in my bio. Please don't hesitate. No story is too big or too small. Please don't ever feel intimidated or like your story isn't big enough. I want to hear all of them. If you're comfortable sharing, send it to me. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. And if you promise to come back to my next episode, I'll save you a seat here in the closet under my stairs.